Hello and welcome to Paranormal Encounters in the Military. I actually was going to call this video part 2, since I thought I already made one like this recently, but after looking into it, apparently the other video was strictly about UFOs. That isn't to say that this video won't include UFOs, since it is a pretty 50-50 split mix with that, ghosts, and dare I say, cryptids as well. A viewer by the name of Sunio McCormick also requested this video a while back, so thank you for that. In advance, I wanted to include the infamous UFO encounter from the World War II Battle of Kursk, which was requested by a viewer with the name Miso Dontask. However, when it came time to find more details about it, all the information was mysteriously gone. I have seen this type of thing happen before in a few instances, and it always leaves me questioning things. With this virus gripping the world and libraries being closed, it makes it really hard for me to utilize my normal source material of books. So basically, I am at the mercy of internet research, which can make things really difficult. Let's start our adventure into the unknown with a report from World War II, and it is a topic that was also suggested by Storm Rider 770. The Solomon Islands are located in the South Pacific Sea, and it is a chain of islands that are just east of Papua New Guinea. This area was a very important staging area during World War II for both the United States and Japan, although the Japanese tended to keep to the nearby Guadalcanal. For many years, stories existed of a race of beings also making the islands their home, and they were seen as giants. It is unclear if the beings are actually giant people or may simply be a form of Sasquatch. I make mention of this since it is thought that those beings make their home in caves in the mountains. They are described as standing between 10 to 14 feet, are covered in fur that can be either black, brown, or reddish in color. They are said to have flat noses, wide mouths, red eyes, a large protruding forehead, double eyebrows, and very long arms. I can happily say that even though they are said to have red eyes, it doesn't mean that they glow that color, like some cryptids I talk about. Interestingly, these beings were frequently seen utilizing a type of club whenever attacks took place. These beings were said to be fairly aggressive if approached, and even to this day it is recommended to tread carefully around the mountains or deep jungles. During World War II, the Japanese soldiers were unlucky enough to come across these beings. In many stories, they described these creatures crashing through the forests and attacking their camps, which did include killing a few of the soldiers. Other times, they were said to mark their territory by snapping trees. Many of the soldiers told stories about hearing the creatures making strange, loud grunts and wails throughout the night. This whole time, the beings were said to be walking around the camps, just waiting for the moment to strike, or maybe in an attempt to drive the soldiers off. Some may be wondering, why didn't the military just open fire on these creatures? That is where this being becomes really interesting. Apparently, bullets proved ineffective against the flesh of these giants. That fact almost reminds me of the Native American stories of the Genoskwa, which were giants that many assumed to be Bigfoot, but would clad its skin in a stone-like armor. A lot of people liken these beings to a form of giant Neanderthal, but others feel that the description strictly puts them in the Bigfoot category. Moving on, we have two stories that were from the Vietnam War, and the first one covers a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time. In my previous video, I mentioned quite a few UFO encounters during wartime, and the one I'm about to share with you was an encounter I forgot to include. Our story takes place on June 15, 1968, in the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam on the Cua Viet River. On that night, Lieutenant Pete Snyder was on patrol in his PCF-12 boat. At about 12:30 in the morning, he received a distress call from PCF-19, claiming that they were under attack by what they stated were enemy helicopters, and needed help. The lieutenant found this odd, since at that time the Vietnamese weren't using helicopters. Pete took off to rendezvous with the troubled boat, but when he finally came to the location, he was in for a shock. There he saw PCF-19, but above it were two strange circular lights that seemed to be hovering directly over the stricken craft. Not long after this, one of the lights suddenly discharged a bright flash, which completely enveloped PCF-19, leaving nothing but flying debris and water in its wake. The two lights then sped off towards the open sea, disappearing from sight for the moment. Fortunately, Pete's boat was able to recover two men who had survived the previous explosion. Once aboard, they relayed that those lights had been following them for quite some time, and they finally decided to fire on the strange objects, which, incidentally, was the same one that destroyed their boat. Later on that same night, Pete saw those lights return, and he said that they were about 300 yards away from him and about 100 feet above the water. He called in the sighting to find out if it was a known craft, but his headquarters came back stating that no aircraft were in the area at that time. Knowing the result of the last encounter, he immediately ordered his crew to open fire on the mysterious craft. When it was realized that their rounds were having little effect, he called for their boat to retreat. The whole time the lights took to following the boat and did attempt to return fire. Lieutenant Snyder's engine man named Jim Steffes reported later that he could see the craft had an observation pod on them, where he could see two beings sitting side by side. Luckily, a couple of F-4 Phantom II jets showed up and managed to chase the lights off towards the sea. In a change of subject, but staying within the Vietnam War, we are looking at a few ghost encounters. During this time, the soldiers encountered various very real dangers when walking about the jungles. However, another danger lurked that no weapons could hurt. According to local lore, the spirits of the dead who don't have a resting place would frequently make their home in the trees. For the most part, these beings are fairly benign, but they have been known to cause destruction to individuals to this day. Even as such, if a tree needs to be cut down, there is a ritual that must be performed in order to appease the spirit and leave the tree. This lore was passed down to many of the soldiers during the war, and there were plenty of sightings of seeing spirit-like beings walking around the forests, only to vanish in the blink of an eye. In one report, a lieutenant came across two such spirits that were standing by a tree just looking at him. As he drew near, they vanished from sight. I have also been told tales from some of my subscribers about Bigfoot sightings in the area. Interestingly, I did find reports of a strange beast with long fangs and completely black eyes that would frequently ambush troops during the day and the night. While being in that environment, I can't rightly say how much was real versus a trick of the mind during that high-stress period of time, but it is interesting nonetheless. Our final story was a tough choice, since there are quite a few paranormal reports during the Afghanistan war, but I decided on the one that can tie into another topic. While at base in the desert, a private was standing watch near dusk when he noticed a black figure standing about 200 yards from his position. Immediately the sergeant was called, and he too saw the silhouette just standing there. When he asked the private about this person, he was told it had just popped up out of nowhere. The two soldiers warily watched the figure for about 3 hours, and when they looked through binoculars, the being was definitely human-shaped, but appeared to have its back to them. It was described as being of average height and build and appeared to be male. At one point, a thermal monocular was utilized, and oddly enough, this person didn't give off any heat signatures. Then finally at one point it just vanished without moving. 6 months later, the same unit were on patrol when they saw two silhouettes standing in the desert. The soldiers quit moving for fear of an attack, but again, these beings seemed to have their backs to the men. A couple of the unit decided to get a closer look at these individuals, and when they got to about 50 yards from them, they immediately disappeared. In another similar report, a different unit told the story of seeing a person that appeared to be in a white robe following them. Only this person was able to walk through trees and objects. At one point, one of the soldiers managed to get a good look at the being through binoculars and saw that it had glowing yellow eyes, and it appeared to be staring right at him, even though there was quite a bit of distance between the two and there wasn't much light. The soldier could just tell that this being was able to see him directly. Earlier in the night, one of the unit actually began to get the feeling of peace and had to shake himself from the unexplained urge to want to join the being. Later, this person in white appeared to raise its arm as if to wave, but then its limb was described to almost melt back into the being, as if it wasn't an arm at all. I really paraphrased that story, but I found it really fascinating. I'm sure many of you who are familiar with my channel know what I'm thinking these beings are. There have been many tales told very similar to these about sightings of beings that roam about the deserts. A lot of the time they are simply called ghosts, but many view them, much like I do, that they are actually jinn. Everything seems to fit, including the inexplicable draw to entice people to it. I am unsure if those in this story had ill intent or not, but it was probably for the best to stay away. So now we get to the 3 comments that I loved from last week's video. Before starting, I didn't get a moment over the past few days to respond to any of your comments from last week's video, but I assure you, I read them all. The first one comes from Restion Serpentine, who says, "Snickers, everything is bigger in Texas. Love me some surviving dinosaurs. If Big Bird from Sesame Street was a Thunderbird, would make episodes a little more interesting." Thank you for that, Restion Serpentine. I seriously got a kick out of your comment. Not to ruin anyone's childhood, but we never did question how random people seem to just be living amongst Big Bird's Muppet pals for no reason. The next one comes from Monchichi, who says, "Great video, as usual. The only problem with it is, it was way too short. Stay safe." Thank you, my friend. I hope your family is staying safe as well. When it comes to my videos, I never know what is considered too long. I normally make videos around 16 minutes, but even as such, YouTube tells me that most viewers click off around the 9-minute mark. This doesn't stop me from keeping with 16 minutes, but I do wonder about uploads if they are longer than that. Last but not least is from Deep Sea Ocean Man Films, who says, "I wish you could do a podcast. I would listen to them for hours." Thank you so much for that, Deep Sea Ocean Films. I would honestly love to have my own podcast, but I am unsure if I could split my time up successfully between life, making these videos, and a podcast. It certainly would save me a lot of time with editing if I simply became a podcast. I think that would probably be an endeavor that I would look into if I had other help, or if YouTube's system got any worse than it already is. I am certainly not ruling out that idea, so let me mark that as maybe. Before I end the video this week, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about 2 things. First, after posting last week's video, I checked my channel's email and I was greeted with a shocking surprise. One of my subscribers named Yvette Melgar sent me an email with some fan art she created for my channel. I absolutely love it and the artwork is fantastic. As odd as it may sound when I first created my channel, one of my secret wishes was that one day I would be presented artwork from my fans. So in saying that, this email I received really meant a lot to me. Thank you so much, Yvette. The other thing that I wanted to tell you all about is a few weeks ago I saw a lot of comments about my merchandise store not having any black colored clothing. I found this really odd since I predominantly wear black clothes. So I looked into the matter and I added black colored variants for pretty much everything my store has. I made the change for the apparel that has Chewy's logo on it only for 2 reasons. First, the Ice Wolf one has a white background on it, and putting that on a black shirt feels like a sticker. But more importantly, many of you know I've been steadily phasing out that logo more in favor of the Chewy one. As always, if you'd be interested in sending me one of your encounter stories, fan art, or simply just to say hi, you can do so by emailing me at benmillerchannel@gmail.com. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!